Have you ever wondered why some men can walk into any room and instantly command attention without saying a word? Why their presence alone can shift the entire energy of a space, making everyone straighten their spines and measure their words? It's not about size. It's not about volume. It's about something far more primal. They carry themselves like kings in a world full of subjects, and everyone feels it. Thomas Shelby understood this better than most. He knew that in this world, you will either be respected or you will be stepped on. There is no middle ground for those who want to truly live. The first truth Thomas Shelby lived by is that respect is never given. It is always taken. Most men spend their lives waiting for permission to be powerful, waiting for someone to validate their worth, waiting for the world to recognize their value. But Shelby knew that waiting is the death of ambition. He didn't ask for respect. He commanded it through his actions, his presence, his unwavering certainty in his own authority. When you walk into a room expecting to be dismissed, you will be. When you speak as if your words might not matter, they won't. But when you carry yourself like a man who knows his own power, the world has no choice but to acknowledge it. Consider how Shelby never explained himself unless it served a strategic purpose. He didn't justify his decisions to those who weren't worthy of his reasoning. This is the second truth. Explanation is often submission in disguise. The moment you start explaining yourself to everyone who questions you, you hand them power over your choices. You become a defendant in a court where they've appointed themselves judge. Shelby understood that powerful men don't defend their decisions, they own them. Right or wrong, they stand behind their choices with such conviction that others begin to doubt their own judgment instead. Watch how he moved through the world. Every gesture calculated, every word measured, every silence strategic. This brings us to the third truth. Your energy is your currency. Spend it wisely. Most people scatter their attention like coins thrown in the wind, desperately seeking approval from anyone who will give it. But Shelby hoarded his energy like a miser hoards gold. He gave his full attention only to those who had earned it, only to situations that truly mattered. This scarcity made his attention valuable. When Thomas Shelby looked at you, really looked at you, you felt it. When he spoke to you, you listened. Not because he was loud, but because his words were rare enough to carry weight. The fourth truth that governed his life was that fear and respect are often indistinguishable. People will tell you that it's better to be loved than feared, but Shelby knew better. Love is fickle, conditional, easily withdrawn when convenience demands it. But fear, respect born of fear, that endures. It doesn't require affection or understanding. It simply requires the recognition that crossing this man comes with consequences. Shelby didn't hurt people for pleasure. He hurt them for purpose. Every act of violence was a message, every threat a promise, every consequence a lesson for all who were watching. Here's what most people don't understand about power. It's not about what you do. It's about what people believe you might do. This is the fifth truth. The imagination of consequences is often more powerful than consequences themselves. Shelby cultivated an aura of unpredictability, not through chaos, but through controlled mystery. People knew he was capable of extreme action, but they could never predict exactly when or how it would come. This uncertainty kept them careful around him, respectful in his presence, hesitant to cross lines they couldn't clearly see. You see, Thomas Shelby never begged for loyalty. He inspired it through strength and punished betrayal with precision. This is the sixth truth that weak men refuse to learn. Loyalty cannot be bought with kindness alone. It must be earned through power and maintained through consequences. Those who served Shelby did so not just because they liked him, but because they knew the cost of disappointing him. He created a structure where serving him was the smart choice, where betraying him was clearly the foolish one. This wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. But here's where most people misunderstand men like Shelby. They think his power came from violence, from intimidation, from fear alone. The seventh truth reveals the real source of his dominance. True power comes from the ability to control your own emotions while reading others like open books. Shelby could sit in a room full of enemies and never let them see his fear, his anger, his doubt. Meanwhile, he could spot their tells, their weaknesses, their desperation from across the room. Emotional control isn't about feeling nothing. It's about choosing what you feel, when you feel it, and who gets to see it. Consider how he handled disrespect. When someone crossed him, Shelby didn't react with immediate rage. He calculated. He planned. He waited for the perfect moment to respond with maximum impact. This is the eighth truth. Delayed consequences are often more powerful than immediate ones. When you react instantly to every slight, you become predictable. People learn to manage your anger, to time their offenses, to weather your storms. But when your retaliation comes unexpectedly, when it arrives weeks or months later with devastating precision, people learn a different lesson. They learn that nothing is forgotten, that every debt will be collected, that crossing you has consequences that extend far beyond the moment. The ninth truth that Shelby embodied is that your reputation is your most valuable asset. Everything he did was calculated to build and maintain his legend. The way he dressed, the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, all of it contributed to the myth of Thomas Shelby. He understood that people don't just react to who you are in the moment. They react to everything they've heard about you, everything they believe you're capable of, everything your name represents. He cultivated his reputation like a gardener tends to his most prized plant, carefully, strategically, with long-term vision. But reputation without substance is just performance, and Shelby knew this. The 10th truth is that you must be willing to back up every threat, every promise, every implication of power with real action. Empty threats destroy credibility faster than silence. When Shelby said something would happen, it happened. When he made a promise, he kept it. When he issued a warning, ignoring it came with real consequences. This consistency between his words and his actions created an unshakable foundation for his authority. People believed him because experience had taught them that his word was his bond, whether that bond brought reward or ruin. Here's something that separates men like Shelby from the pretenders. He never tried to be liked by everyone. This is the 11th truth. The moment you need everyone's approval, you lose everyone's respect. Shelby made choices that created enemies, took stands that made some people hate him, drew lines that forced others to choose sides. But in doing so, he created something more valuable than universal affection. He created loyalty among those who truly understood him, and clear boundaries for those who didn't. Man who tries to please everyone pleases no one. The man who stands for something, even if that something makes enemies, commands respect from both his allies and his opponents. The 12th truth that defined Shelby's approach to power was his understanding that information is ammunition. He always knew more than he revealed, always held cards he didn't show. In every conversation, every negotiation, every confrontation, Shelby operated from a position of informational superiority. He gathered intelligence like other men gathered wealth, hoarding it until the perfect moment to spend it for maximum effect. This created another layer of fear and respect around him. People knew that he knew things, that crossing him might expose secrets they thought were buried. That underestimating his awareness was a dangerous gamble. Watch how Shelby handled alliances. He never made himself dependent on any single relationship, any single source of power, any single advantage. This is the 13th truth. Dependence is vulnerability, and vulnerability is weakness. The moment you need someone more than they need you, you hand them power over your life. Shelby structured his world so that others needed him more than he needed them. He made himself valuable to his allies while never becoming reliant on their continued support. This independence allowed him to make hard choices, to take unpopular stands, to operate according to his own moral code rather than bending to the will of others. But perhaps the most important lesson from Thomas Shelby's approach to power is this 14th truth. Consistency is everything. His enemies knew what to expect from him. His allies knew they could count on him, and everyone knew that his character was fixed and unchanging. He didn't have good days and bad days in terms of his fundamental nature. He was always calculating, always dangerous, always in control. This consistency created a sense of stability around him that people found both comforting and terrifying. They knew where they stood with him, what was expected of them, what would happen if they met or failed to meet those expectations. The 15th truth that governed Shelby's life was his understanding that true power is quiet. He didn't need to announce his authority, to remind people of his capabilities, to constantly assert his dominance. His power was so established, so unquestioned, that it operated like gravity, invisible but undeniable. The man who has to tell everyone he's powerful isn't. The man who has to threaten constantly is insecure. But the man whose mere presence changes the energy of a room, whose quiet word carries more weight than another man's shout, that man has achieved something rare and valuable. Here's what most people miss about respect and fear. They think these emotions are about the person inspiring them, but really, they're about the person feeling them. When someone respects you, they're acknowledging their own understanding of your power. When they fear you, they're admitting their own vulnerability. Shelby never made it about him needing their recognition. He simply became the kind of man whose power was impossible to ignore. This is the 16th truth. You cannot demand respect, but you can become impossible to disrespect. Consider how Shelby dealt with challenges to his authority. He didn't waste energy on small provocations, minor disrespects, or insignificant opponents. But when someone truly challenged his position, threatened his family, or crossed lines that mattered, his response was swift, decisive, and educational for everyone watching. This is the 17th truth. Choose your battles, but win the ones you choose. The man who fights every fight exhausts himself and diminishes the impact of his victories. But the man who picks his moments carefully and responds with overwhelming force when necessary sends a clear message about the cost of true opposition. The 18th truth that made Shelby legendary was his ability to turn enemies into allies without appearing weak. He understood that defeating someone completely often created a lifelong enemy, but defeating them partially, while offering them a path to redemption, created a loyal follower. He gave his opponents chances to save face, to join him, to benefit from aligning with his power rather than opposing it. This wasn't mercy, it was strategy. Converting enemies into allies multiplied his strength while reducing his opposition. But here's the thing about living like Thomas Shelby. It requires sacrifice. The 19th truth is that power is lonely. The man who inspires fear and respect often finds himself isolated by that same power. People are careful around him, guarded in their interactions, strategic in their friendship. The price of being uncontrollable is that genuine connection becomes rare. Shelby paid this price willingly because he understood that loneliness was preferable to being controlled, that isolation was better than exploitation. The 20th truth about Shelby's approach is that he never apologized for his nature. He didn't try to convince people that he was really a good man deep down, that his harshness was just a facade, that his ruthlessness was regrettable but necessary. He owned his darkness, accepted his reputation, embraced the aspects of himself that made others uncomfortable. This self-acceptance created a kind of authenticity that people found compelling, even when they found it frightening. He wasn't trying to be anything other than exactly what he was, and that certainty of identity became part of his power. The 21st truth reveals why Shelby's methods worked where others failed. He understood that people crave strong leadership, even when they complain about it. Deep down, most people want someone else to make the hard decisions, to take responsibility for difficult choices, to carry the burden of leadership. Shelby willingly accepted this role, took on the weight of command, made the choices others were too weak or too afraid to make. This made him valuable to his organization and feared by his enemies, because they knew he would do what they could not. Here's what separates men like Shelby from those who merely play at power. The 22nd truth is that he was willing to lose everything to maintain his principles. He didn't hold on to power through compromise, through bending to pressure, through abandoning his values when times got tough. He would rather fall as Thomas Shelby than succeed as someone else's puppet. This willingness to lose everything, paradoxically, made him almost impossible to defeat, because his enemies could never find leverage against a man who valued his identity more than his comfort. The 23rd truth about Shelby's dominance was his mastery of timing. He knew when to strike, when to wait, when to speak, when to remain silent. Power isn't just about having strength, it's about knowing exactly when and how to use it. Shelby could sit through hours of provocation, insults, and challenges without reacting. But when the moment was right, when his response would have maximum impact, he moved with decisive force. This patience multiplied the effectiveness of his actions and created an aura of strategic brilliance around everything he did. But perhaps the most important thing to understand about Thomas Shelby is this final truth. He became powerful not because he was born different, but because he made different choices. He chose to value his own respect over others' approval. He chose to accept loneliness rather than compromise his principles. He chose to inspire fear rather than court affection. He chose to be strategic rather than reactive. These weren't accidents of personality. They were conscious decisions made repeatedly until they became his nature. You see, the world will always need men like Thomas Shelby. Not because violence is good, not because fear is preferable to love, but because someone has to be willing to make the hard choices, to draw the difficult lines, to stand firm when everyone else bends. The comfortable masses depend on men who are comfortable with being uncomfortable, who can shoulder burdens others cannot carry, who can make decisions others are too weak to make. The question you must ask yourself is this: are you willing to be that man? Are you willing to be feared if it means you cannot be controlled? Are you willing to be alone if it means you cannot be manipulated? Are you willing to be misunderstood if it means you can live according to your own code? Because respect and fear are not emotions you can inspire through wishful thinking or gentle persuasion. They are responses to demonstrated power, consistent strength, unwavering principle. Thomas Shelby knew something that most men never learn. In this world, you will either command respect through your strength, or you will beg for scraps of attention through your weakness. You will either inspire fear through your unpredictability, or you will be dismissed through your compliance. You will either live according to your own rules, or you will spend your life following someone else's. The choice is yours. But understand this: once you choose strength, once you decide to live like a man who cannot be broken, there is no going back. You will lose friends who only liked you when you were manageable. You will face opposition from those who benefited from your weakness. You will be called cruel by people who mistake strength for cruelty, heartless by those who confuse boundaries with indifference. But you will also discover something that most men never experience: the deep satisfaction of living according to your own code, the peace that comes from knowing you cannot be bought or manipulated or controlled. You will find that true freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want, but the strength to do what you believe is right, regardless of the consequences. Remember this: they will respect you or fear you, but they will never again dismiss you as irrelevant. And in a world that profits from your weakness, that feeds on your compliance, that depends on your willingness to remain small, becoming impossible to ignore is the greatest victory of all. They will respect you if you earn it, fear you if you demand it, but they will never again mistake you for someone they can control. And that transformation, that evolution from controllable to sovereign, that is the true golden rule of Thomas Shelby. But understand this final lesson, the one that separates pretenders from legends. Thomas Shelby knew that power without purpose is just destruction, and destruction without direction is chaos. He wasn't powerful for the sake of being powerful. Every calculated move, every strategic decision, every moment of controlled violence served a larger vision. He built an empire not just to dominate others, but to protect what mattered to him, to secure a legacy that would outlast his mortality. This is what the imitators miss. They copy the methods, but ignore the mission. The truly dangerous man is not the one who seeks power to fill an emptiness inside himself, but the one who wields power in service of something greater than his own ego. Shelby's ruthlessness was anchored by loyalty to his family. His cruelty was balanced by his code. His coldness was tempered by his capacity for love. This complexity made him unpredictable in the most unsettling way, because his enemies could never be sure which version of him they would encounter. You see, anyone can learn to be cold, to be calculating, to inspire fear through cruelty. But it takes a rare man to be all of these things while still maintaining his humanity, still honoring the bonds that matter, still protecting the innocent even while destroying the guilty. This is the paradox that made Thomas Shelby legendary. He was simultaneously the most dangerous man in the room, and the most loyal, the most feared, and the most protective. So when you choose to walk this path, when you decide to become the kind of man who commands rather than pleads, remember that your power is only as valuable as the principles that guide it. Without honor, you become just another tyrant who will eventually fall. Without loyalty, you become isolated and vulnerable. Without love for something beyond yourself, you become hollow, and hollow men break under pressure. The golden rule of Thomas Shelby is not just about inspiring respect and fear. It's about earning the right to wield that power through the strength of your character, the clarity of your purpose, and the unwavering commitment to the code that defines you. They will respect you, they will fear you, but most importantly, they will remember you as a man who stood for something worth standing for, even when standing alone.